Karoline Leavitt was not your average attendee at high-profile events. She had worked hard to get where she was, climbing the ladder in her career, building connections, and proving herself time and again. That's why when she received an invitation to one of the most exclusive political summits of the year, she felt a mix of excitement and pride. The event wasn't just any gathering. It featured keynote speakers who were household names, including none other than Michelle Obama. For Karoline, this was more than just an opportunity to listen. It was a chance to be seen, to network, and to soak in wisdom from someone she deeply admired. The day of the summit arrived, and Karoline made sure every detail was perfect. Her navy blue suit was crisp, her hair neatly styled, and her confidence sky-high as she walked into the grand hall. The venue itself was breathtaking. High ceilings adorned with chandeliers, plush red carpets lining the aisles, and rows of seats arranged like theater seating. There was a buzz in the air, a sense of anticipation that only grew stronger as people mingled and took their places. Everyone knew they were about to witness something special. Karoline glanced down at her ticket for the 100th time, double-checking her seat assignment. VIP section, row 1, seat 5, it read clearly. This wasn't just any seat, it was prime real estate right up front, close enough to see every expression on Michelle Obama's face as she spoke. Feeling a surge of satisfaction, Karoline headed toward her designated spot. As she settled into the cushioned chair, she couldn't help but smile. Months of effort had paid off, and now she was exactly where she belonged. But life has a funny way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. Just as Karoline was getting comfortable, adjusting her notebook and pen on her lap, a man in a black suit approached her. He wore a polite but firm expression, the kind that immediately put people on edge. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, his voice calm yet authoritative. "There seems to have been a mistake with your seating arrangement. You'll need to move to another section." Karoline blinked, caught off guard. "A mistake? I don't think so," she replied, holding up her ticket as evidence. "This says VIP row 1. This is my seat." The man glanced at the ticket briefly before shaking his head. "I understand, but there's been a change. Your new seat is in section C, row 8. Section C? Row 8? Karoline's heart sank. That section was practically in the nosebleed seats, far removed from the energy and intimacy of the front row. It didn't make sense. Why would they reassign her last minute after everything had already been confirmed? Still, arguing seemed futile. The man's demeanor left no room for negotiation. Reluctantly, Karoline gathered her things and moved, trying to mask her frustration as she navigated through the crowded aisle to her new, less desirable spot. As she sat down in the distant seat, Karoline couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Was this really just a simple mix-up, or was there more to the story? Little did she know, the drama was only beginning, and within minutes, the entire event would spiral into chaos. Karoline tried to focus on the positive as she adjusted to her new seat in Section C. She reminded herself that being at the event was still a big deal, even if she wasn't sitting front and center. But it was hard not to feel a pang of resentment. The view from row 8 wasn't great. She could barely see the stage without craning her neck, and the energy in this section felt muted compared to the buzz up front. Around her, people chatted casually, seemingly unfazed by their less-than-ideal seating arrangements. Karoline wondered if anyone else had been moved last minute or if she was the only one singled out. She glanced at her phone, scrolling absent-mindedly, through emails while waiting for the program to start. A few minutes passed, and just as she began to settle into her chair, something strange happened. A murmur rippled through the crowd, a low hum of whispers that quickly grew louder. Heads turned toward the entrance, where a group of security personnel had appeared alongside several managers. They looked tense, their faces tight with urgency as they conferred quietly before moving toward different sections of the room. At first, Karoline thought maybe there was some kind of safety issue, a fire drill or an unexpected evacuation. But then she noticed something odd. The staff members who had been stationed throughout the venue were being called over one by one. Ushers, coordinators, even the person manning the check-in desk, all of them were summoned away from their posts. Each was escorted out of the hall, their expressions ranging from confusion to outright panic. No announcements were made, no explanations given. It was as though they were being removed without warning, leaving behind a growing sense of unease among the attendees. The murmurs turned into full-blown chatter as people began speculating about what was going on. "What's happening?" someone near Karoline asked aloud, voicing the question everyone was thinking. Another attendee shrugged. "No idea, but it looks serious." Some joked nervously about secret agents or hidden cameras trying to lighten the mood, but most couldn't shake the feeling that something major had gone wrong. Karoline's mind raced as she pieced together the timeline. Just 5 minutes earlier, she'd been asked to move from her VIP seat under mysterious circumstances. Now almost all the staff members were being fired, or at least that's what it seemed like. Could these two events be connected? Had her relocation triggered some kind of internal meltdown? Or was this part of a larger problem that had nothing to do with her? As the minutes ticked by, the atmosphere in the room shifted. What had started as excitement and anticipation now felt heavy with tension. People whispered theories to each other, piecing together fragments of information like detectives solving a mystery. One man claimed he'd overheard a heated argument backstage between the head organizer and a senior staff member. Another woman suggested that someone might have violated protocol, leading to the sudden purge. Whatever the reason, it was clear that the day wasn't going according to plan, for anyone. Karoline couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions. On one hand, she was curious, her journalist instincts kicking in as she listened to the swirling rumors. On the other hand, she couldn't ignore the nagging thought that she might somehow be tied to this mess. After all, why would someone insist on moving her unless it was important? And why would so many staff members get fired immediately afterward? None of it added up, and the lack of answers only fueled her anxiety. Despite the chaos, the show had to go on. Eventually, the organizers managed to regain control of the situation enough to keep things moving forward. Attendees were told to take their seats again, though the mood remained uneasy. Karoline found herself torn between frustration and fascination. This was supposed to be a day of inspiration and learning, yet here she was caught in the middle of what felt like a corporate disaster movie. Still, she reminded herself that Michelle Obama was about to speak, and no matter what else happened, hearing her words would make the day worthwhile. For now, Karoline leaned back in her chair, watching as the remaining staff scrambled to prepare for the main event. The stage lights dimmed slightly, signaling that the keynote address was imminent. But even as the spotlight turned toward the podium, the unanswered questions lingered in the air, casting a shadow over what should have been a moment of celebration and connection. The lights dimmed further, and the room fell into an uneasy silence. Everyone seemed to be holding their breath, waiting for what came next. The chaos of the past few minutes still lingered in the air, but as Michelle Obama stepped onto the stage, a wave of applause broke out. It was polite at first, hesitant almost, but it quickly grew louder, filling the hall with energy. For a moment, the tension melted away, replaced by admiration and respect for the woman who commanded attention without even trying. Karoline leaned forward in her seat, straining to get a better view. From row 8, she could barely see the podium, but there was no mistaking the former First Lady's presence. Dressed in a vibrant outfit that radiated confidence, she stood tall, scanning the crowd with a warm smile before beginning her speech. Her voice carried effortlessly through the microphone, rich and steady, immediately drawing everyone in. She started by acknowledging the unexpected drama earlier. "Life has a way of throwing us curveballs," she said, pausing briefly as murmurs rippled through the audience. "Sometimes things don't go according to plan, but how we respond to those moments defines who we are." Karoline felt a chill run down her spine. Those words hit close to home. She couldn't help but think about how her day had unfolded. The forced move from her VIP seat, the confusion over the staff firings, and now this powerful reminder to stay grounded despite uncertainty. It was as if Michelle Obama could sense the collective unease in the room and was speaking directly to it. As the speech continued, the former First Lady dove into themes of resilience, leadership, and accountability. She shared personal stories from her time in the White House, recounting challenges she faced and lessons she learned along the way. Each anecdote was delivered with humor, grace, and honesty, making it impossible not to feel inspired. At one point, she spoke about the importance of staying true to yourself, even when others question your worth or try to push you aside. "That's something I've always believed," she said, her tone firm yet kind. "You can't let someone else's doubts define you. You have to know your value and stand firm in it." Karoline nodded unconsciously, feeling a lump form in her throat. Earlier that day, she had questioned whether she deserved her VIP seat or if moving to Section C meant she wasn't good enough. Hearing Michelle Obama speak so candidly about self-worth made her realize how much power lies in believing in yourself, even when others don't. The crowd hung on every word, clapping enthusiastically after each story or insight. But beneath the surface, Karoline noticed something else. People were processing the events of the day differently. Some attendees whispered quietly to their neighbors, connecting Michelle Obama's message back to the earlier drama. Others sat silently, lost in thought, perhaps reflecting on their own struggles with fairness or resilience. Even though the staff firings hadn't been officially explained, the speech provided a unifying thread, a chance to focus on bigger ideas rather than dwell on unanswered questions. Toward the end of her address, Michelle Obama shifted gears, slightly, addressing the idea of accountability. "We all make mistakes," she said, her gaze sweeping across the room. "But owning up to them is what matters. Whether it's in our personal lives or professional ones, taking responsibility shows strength, not weakness." This line resonated deeply with Karoline. She wondered if anyone involved in the seating mix-up or the staff firings would step forward to explain what went wrong. Would the organizers issue an apology? Or would they brush it under the rug, pretending nothing happened? Either way, Michelle Obama's words served as a gentle nudge to both the organizers and the attendees that transparency and integrity matter. When the speech concluded, the room erupted into thunderous applause. People rose to their feet, giving a standing ovation that lasted several minutes. For Karoline, the experience was bittersweet. On one hand, hearing Michelle Obama speak live was everything she'd hoped for, an unforgettable blend of wisdom, inspiration, and authenticity. On the other hand, the circumstances surrounding the event cast a shadow over the occasion. Still, she couldn't deny that the speech had given her clarity. Instead of dwelling on the negatives, she chose to focus on the positives. The lessons she'd learned, the connections she'd made, and the reminder to trust herself no matter what. As the audience began filing out of the hall, conversations buzzed around her. Some people praised the speech, calling it transformative. Others speculated about the earlier drama, wondering if more details would emerge later. Karoline stayed seated for a few extra minutes, letting the weight of the day sink in. Despite everything, the frustration, the confusion, the whirlwind of emotions, she knew she'd walk away stronger because of it. By the time she finally stood up to leave, the hall was nearly empty. Staff members who hadn't been fired were busy tidying up, avoiding eye contact with departing guests. Outside, reporters gathered near the exit, eager to interview attendees about the bizarre turn of events. Cameras flashed, microphones were thrust toward faces, and questions flew fast and furious. Karoline hesitated for a moment, wondering whether to stop and share her side of the story. But then she decided against it. This wasn't just her story. It belonged to everyone who had been there. And maybe, just maybe, the truth would come out in time. For now, Karoline took a deep breath, adjusted her bag on her shoulder, and stepped into the cool evening air. The day had been chaotic, yes, but it had also been a reminder of something important. Life rarely goes as planned. What matters most is how you handle the twists and turns, and today, she handled them with grace. As Karoline stepped outside, the cool evening air felt like a relief after the heated tension inside the hall. The streets were alive with activity, attendees chatting in small groups, reporters trying to grab sound bites, and cars pulling up to whisk away VIPs. Despite the chaos of the day, there was an undeniable energy in the air, a mix of curiosity and excitement that only big events could create. But for Karoline, the moment felt surreal. She had just experienced something extraordinary, a high-profile event turned upside down, and yet, here she was, walking out into the night like it was any other day. She paused for a moment, taking in the scene around her. Reporters were swarming attendees, asking questions about the staff firings and the seating mix-up. "What happened inside?" one journalist shouted, shoving a microphone toward a man in a suit. Another reporter asked, "Do you think this will affect future events?" People gave their opinions freely, some speculating wildly, while others shrugged and said they didn't know anything. Karoline watched it all unfold, feeling torn between speaking up and staying quiet. Part of her wanted to tell her story, to explain how she'd been moved from her rightful seat and how the entire staff seemed to disappear shortly afterward. But another part of her hesitated. What good would it do? This wasn't just her experience, it belonged to everyone who had been there. Besides, she didn't have all the answers. All she knew was what she had seen and felt: confusion, frustration, and ultimately a sense of clarity thanks to Michelle Obama's powerful words. Instead of stopping to talk to the press, Karoline decided to walk. She needed time to process everything that had happened. As she strolled down the street, the noise of the crowd faded behind her. Her heels clicked against the pavement, echoing softly in the quiet night. She replayed the day's events in her mind, piecing together the moments that stood out: the polite but firm usher asking her to move, the sudden removal of the staff, and the former First Lady's inspiring speech. Each memory brought a new wave of emotions, from irritation to awe to determination. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was a text from a colleague who hadn't attended the event but had clearly heard about the drama online. "Hey, I saw the news. Are you okay?" the message read. Karoline smiled faintly. Even though social media often exaggerated things, it was comforting to know people cared. She typed back a quick reply. "I'm fine. Long story, but I'll fill you in later." The next few messages came quickly. One from a friend asking if she'd met Michelle Obama. She hadn't. Another from someone joking about the VIP downgrade. Each message reminded her of how quickly stories spread in today's world. By tomorrow morning, the internet would likely be flooded with headlines about the event. Some would focus on Michelle Obama's speech, praising her wisdom and poise. Others would zoom in on the controversy, the mysterious firings, the seating changes, and the whispers of mismanagement. Karoline wondered where her place would be in those narratives. Would anyone care about her perspective? Or would she become just another detail in a larger, messier story? As she continued walking, Karoline found herself reflecting on a deeper level. The day had been chaotic, yes, but it also taught her something valuable. Resilience isn't about avoiding challenges, it's about facing them head-on. When she was asked to move from her VIP seat, she could have argued or made a scene. Instead, she chose to stay composed even though it frustrated her. And when the staff firings threw the event into disarray, she didn't let it overshadow the reason she was there: to learn and grow. In a way, the obstacles she faced only made Michelle Obama's message resonate more deeply. Life throws curveballs, but how we respond defines us. By the time Karoline reached her car, parked a few blocks away, she felt calmer. The initial sting of being moved from her seat had faded, replaced by gratitude for the lessons she'd taken away. Sure, the day hadn't gone as planned, but maybe that was the point. Plans are great, but they don't always prepare you for real life. Real life is messy, unpredictable, and full of moments that test your patience and strength. And sometimes, those moments lead to growth. She unlocked her car door and slid into the driver's seat, letting out a long breath. Before starting the engine, she pulled out her notebook, the same one she'd brought to jot down notes during the speech. Flipping it open, she began writing. At the top of the page, she scribbled a single word: resilience. Below it, she listed the key takeaways from the day, not just from Michelle Obama's speech, but from her own experiences. "Stay calm under pressure," she wrote. "Trust yourself, even when others doubt you. Focus on what truly matters." Writing helped her organize her thoughts. turning the whirlwind of emotions into something tangible. As she closed the notebook and started the car, she realized something important. This wasn't the end of the story. While the event itself was over, its impact would stay with her for a long time. The lessons she learned, the connections she made, and even the frustrations she endured, they were all part of her journey. And who knows? Maybe someday she'd look back on this day not as a disaster, but as a turning point. The drive home was quiet, giving her space to think. As she passed familiar landmarks and neighborhoods, her mind drifted to the future. How would she apply what she'd learned today? Would she approach challenges differently? Speak up more confidently when things didn't feel right? She didn't have all the answers yet, but that was okay. Growth rarely happens overnight. What mattered was that she was willing to reflect, adapt, and keep moving forward. When Karoline finally pulled into her driveway, she sat in the car for a moment, staring at the darkened house. The day had been long, emotionally and mentally exhausting, but she felt a strange sense of peace. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and perhaps even more surprises. But for now, she allowed herself to rest, knowing she'd face today's twists and turns with grace. After all, life's unpredictability is what makes it so beautifully human. The next morning, Karoline woke up to the soft glow of sunlight streaming through her bedroom window. For a brief moment, she forgot about the whirlwind of the previous day, but as soon as she reached for her phone on the nightstand, reality came rushing back. Notifications lit up her screen, emails, texts, and social media alerts all pointing to one thing. The event had exploded online. Headlines dominated news feeds. Mass staff firings shock attendees at high-profile summit, read one article. Another proclaimed, VIP guest relocated minutes before chaos erupts. Comment sections buzzed with speculation, memes mocked the situation, and hashtags like Shar Summit Scandal and Shar's VIP Gate trended across platforms. It seemed everyone had an opinion about what had happened, even those who weren't there. Karoline scrolled through the posts, half amused and half overwhelmed. Some people praised Michelle Obama's speech, calling it a beacon of wisdom amidst the chaos. Others focused solely on the drama, the firings, the seating changes, and the apparent mismanagement. A few commenters speculated that the entire incident might have been staged for publicity, though no evidence supported such claims. Karoline shook her head as she read these theories. The truth was messy enough without adding conspiracy to the mix. What struck her most, however, was how quickly the narrative shifted depending on who was telling the story. To some, she was the victim, a hard-working attendee unfairly moved from her rightful seat. To others, she was just another detail in a larger scandal, maybe even complicit somehow. One tweet stood out. Imagine being kicked out of your VIP spot only to watch the whole staff get fired 5 minutes later. Talk about bad timing. The post had thousands of likes and replies ranging from sympathy to sarcasm. For a moment, Karoline felt exposed, as if strangers were dissecting her life without knowing the full picture. But then she reminded herself of something important. This wasn't really about her. People loved a good story, especially when it involved power dynamics, mistakes, and high-profile figures. She was merely a thread in the fabric of a much bigger tale. Instead of letting the attention bother her, she decided to focus on what mattered, how she responded to the situation. Later that morning, she brewed a cup of coffee and sat by the window, watching the world wake up outside. Birds chirped, neighbors walked their dogs, and kids played in the distance. Everything seemed so normal compared to the chaos of yesterday. As she sipped her coffee, she thought about the lessons she'd jotted down in her notebook. Resilience, composure, focus. These weren't just words. They were tools she could use moving forward. Her phone buzzed again, pulling her back to the present. This time it was a call from a close friend who had seen the news. "Hey, I heard about what happened," the friend said after Karoline picked up. "Are you okay? Do you want to talk about it?" Karoline hesitated for a second before replying. "Yeah, I'm fine. Honestly, it was kind of surreal, but I think I handled it well. It's weird seeing it blow up online, though." Her friend chuckled. Well, you're basically internet famous now. Did you see that tweet about you getting booted from your seat? Karoline laughed despite herself. Yeah, I saw it. It's funny how people latch on to certain details, isn't it? Like, yes, I got moved, but that's not the whole story. Exactly, her friend agreed. People love drama. Just try not to let it stress you out too much. At least you got to hear Michelle Obama speak. That's pretty cool. You're right, Karoline said, smiling. That part was amazing. Her speech was exactly what I needed to hear after everything went sideways. They chatted for a while longer, the conversation lightening Karoline's mood. Talking to someone who cared about her, not the headlines or rumors, was grounding. By the time they hung up, she felt more balanced, ready to tackle whatever came next. As the day went on, Karoline found herself reflecting on how easily situations can spiral out of control. One small decision, to move her from her VIP seat, had set off a chain reaction that affected dozens of people. The firings, the gossip, the viral tweets, it all stemmed from a single moment of miscommunication or oversight. It made her wonder about the importance of clarity and accountability, both in professional settings and everyday life. She decided to channel her thoughts into action. That afternoon, she drafted an email to the event organizers. Keeping her tone respectful but firm, she explained her experience. How she'd been asked to move despite having a valid ticket, and how the lack of explanation left her confused. She didn't demand an apology or accuse anyone of wrongdoing. Instead, she simply requested transparency, asking if they could provide insight into why the staff had been let go and whether similar issues could be avoided in the future. Sending the email felt cathartic. Karoline knew it might not lead to immediate answers, but it was a step toward closure. More importantly, it reinforced her belief in speaking up when something doesn't feel right. Too often, people stay silent, afraid of rocking the boat or drawing attention to themselves. But staying quiet rarely solves anything. Sometimes you have to take a stand, even if it's uncomfortable. By evening, Karoline felt a sense of accomplishment. She had processed the events of the past 24 hours, shared her perspective, and taken steps to advocate for herself. While the outcome remained uncertain, she trusted that she'd done what she could. Life, after all, is full of uncertainties. What matters is how you navigate them. As she settled into bed that night, Karoline thought about the future. The event may have ended in chaos, but it had also sparked growth. She felt stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever to pursue her goals with confidence. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew she could handle them, one step at a time. The next few days passed in a blur for Karoline. The internet buzz around the event showed no signs of slowing down, and neither did her own reflections on what had happened. She found herself replaying moments from that day over and over, like a movie stuck on repeat. But each time, she noticed something new. Whether it was the way the staff members looked as they were escorted out, or the tone of Michelle Obama's voice when she spoke about resilience, every detail seemed to carry deeper meaning now. One morning, as she scrolled through her emails while sipping her coffee, one subject line caught her eye. Response from event organizers. Her heart skipped a beat. This was it. The answer she'd been waiting for. Taking a deep breath, she clicked open the email. It wasn't long, but it was direct. The organizers apologized for the confusion surrounding seating arrangements, explaining that an internal error had led to miscommunication between teams. They also confirmed that several staff members had been dismissed due to protocol violations, though they didn't elaborate further. Finally, they thanked her for reaching out and assured her that steps were being taken to prevent similar incidents in the future. Karoline read the email twice, her emotions shifting with each sentence. On one hand, she appreciated the acknowledgement. It wasn't much, but at least someone had bothered to respond. On the other hand, the explanation felt vague, almost evasive. What exactly were the protocol violations? Why hadn't anyone addressed the issue publicly? And why did it feel like some questions were intentionally left unanswered? She closed her laptop and leaned back in her chair, staring at the ceiling. While part of her wanted to dig deeper, to demand more details or share her frustrations online, another part reminded her of the bigger picture. Life is messy and not every question gets answered neatly. Sometimes all you can do is take what you're given and move forward. Later that day, she decided to meet up with a colleague who had heard about the event through the grapevine. Over lunch at a cozy cafe, they discussed everything, from the chaos of the firings to the lessons Karoline took away from Michelle Obama's speech. At one point, her colleague leaned forward, curiosity lighting up their face. "So, what are you going to do with all this?" they asked. "Like, how does this change things for you?" Karoline paused, considering the question. It was something she hadn't fully articulated yet, not even to herself. But as she thought about it, the answer came naturally. "I think it reminded me of two things," she said slowly. "First, that I need to trust myself more. When stuff like this happens, it's easy to second-guess whether you belong where you are. But I earned my spot at that event, and nobody should make me feel otherwise." Her colleague nodded, encouraging her to continue. "Second," Karoline added, "it showed me the importance of handling challenges with grace. Things didn't go as planned, but I stayed calm, focused on the positives, and tried to learn from it. That's something I want to carry into everything I do." Her colleague smiled, raising their coffee cup in a mock toast. "Well said. Sounds like you've already turned a crazy situation into a win." They spent the rest of the meal chatting about work projects, upcoming events, and lighter topics. By the time they parted ways, Karoline felt lighter, as if sharing her thoughts had lifted a weight off her shoulders. Talking it out hadn't just helped her process the experience. It had solidified her resolve to grow from it. That evening, as she walked home under a pink and orange sky, Karoline realized something else. The story wasn't truly over. Sure, the event itself was done, and the organizers had sent their response. But its ripple effects would linger, for her, for the attendees who witnessed the drama, and even for the staff members who lost their jobs. Every person involved carried a piece of that day with them, shaping how they viewed fairness, accountability, and resilience. For Karoline, the real takeaway was personal growth. She had faced adversity head-on, chosen composure over frustration, and emerged stronger because of it. Yet she also understood that growth doesn't happen in isolation. It's shaped by the people around us, the stories we tell ourselves, and the actions we take afterward. Back at home, she pulled out her notebook again, the same one she'd used during the event. Flipping to a fresh page, she began writing. This time, instead of listing lessons, she wrote a letter to her future self. "Dear future me," it started. "If you ever find yourself in a tough spot again, remember this. Life is unpredictable, but so are you. You're capable of handling whatever comes your way, as long as you stay true to yourself." She filled the page with reminders of her strengths, moments of triumph, and promises to keep pushing forward. Writing it felt like planting seeds for the future, seeds of confidence, perspective, and hope. As she closed the notebook and placed it back on the shelf, Karoline felt a quiet sense of peace. The past week had been chaotic, yes, but it had also been transformative. She had faced uncertainty, navigated public scrutiny, and turned frustration into fuel for growth. These experiences wouldn't define her forever, but they would shape her in ways she couldn't yet imagine. Before heading to bed, she glanced at her phone one last time. Social media was still buzzing with reactions to the event, but she scrolled past them without stopping. Those narratives belonged to others. Now, her story was hers alone, and it was far from finished. The days turned into weeks, and life slowly returned to its usual rhythm for Karoline. The event became a memory, a vivid one, sure, but it no longer consumed her thoughts the way it had in those first few days. Still, its impact lingered in subtle ways. She found herself approaching challenges with a newfound sense of calm, almost as if she'd been battle-tested by the chaos of that day. When something unexpected happened at work or in her personal life, she reminded herself, "You've handled worse." One afternoon, while catching up on emails, she noticed an invitation to speak at a local networking event. It wasn't anything glamorous, just a small gathering of professionals looking to share insights and connect. But it piqued her interest. Public speaking wasn't something she'd done often, and the thought of standing in front of a crowd made her nervous. But then she remembered Michelle Obama's words about owning your value and staying true to yourself. If she could survive being moved from her VIP seat and navigate the whirlwind that followed, surely she could handle a room of friendly faces. She accepted the invitation. Preparing for the talk gave her a chance to reflect even more deeply on what she'd learned from the summit. As she drafted her notes, she realized how much of her experience tied back to themes like resilience, accountability, and self-trust. These weren't just abstract ideas. They were lessons she had lived through. Sharing them felt meaningful, like passing along wisdom that might help someone else facing their own challenges. On the day of the networking event, Karoline arrived early, clutching her notebook and rehearsing her opening lines under her breath. The venue was cozy, a community center with mismatched chairs and warm lighting. Attendees trickled in, exchanging polite greetings and settling into their seats. Though the setting was far less formal than the high-profile summit, there was still a buzz of anticipation in the air. When it was her turn to speak, she stepped up to the makeshift podium, took a deep breath, and smiled. "Hi, everyone," she began, her voice steady despite the flutter in her chest. "Today I want to talk about something we all face at some point in our lives: unpredictability." She went on to share her story, not every detail, but enough to paint a picture. She talked about the excitement of receiving a coveted VIP ticket, the frustration of being relocated, and the shock of watching staff members get fired shortly afterward. She described how Michelle Obama's speech had inspired her to focus on resilience rather than dwell on disappointment. By the time she finished, the room was silent, save for the occasional nod or knowing glance among the audience. Afterward, several people approached her to thank her for sharing her story. One woman said, "I needed to hear that today. Life feels so chaotic right now, and hearing how you stayed grounded really helped." Another man added, "It's funny how the most challenging moments end up teaching us the most." Their words stayed with her long after the event ended. Speaking openly about her experience hadn't just helped her process it. It had created connections, sparked conversations, and reminded her of the power of vulnerability. In a world where everyone tries to project perfection, admitting that you don't always have it together can be surprisingly liberating. As the weeks passed, Karoline noticed other changes too. At work, she began speaking up more during meetings, offering ideas without overthinking whether they'd be well received. Outside of work, she started taking risks she might have avoided before, signing up for workshops, joining new groups, and putting herself out there in ways that pushed her comfort zone. Each step felt like proof that she was growing, not just professionally but personally. But perhaps the biggest shift was internal. The event had taught her to embrace uncertainty instead of fearing it. Before, she might have obsessed over planning, every detail of her life trying to control outcomes. Now she understood that sometimes the best growth comes from letting go and trusting the process, even when it doesn't make sense in the moment. One evening, as she sat on her couch flipping through old photos, she came across a snapshot taken at the summit. It was blurry, snapped hastily as attendees gathered near the stage after Michelle Obama's speech. Karoline didn't remember taking it, but seeing herself in the background brought a smile to her face. Back then, she'd been frustrated, confused, maybe even a little embarrassed. Yet here she was now, months later, stronger because of it. Her phone buzzed, pulling her attention away from the photo. It was a text from a friend who had recently attended a similar high-profile conference. "Hey, guess what?" the message read. "They messed up my seating too. What are the odds?" Karoline chuckled, shaking her head. "Welcome to my world," she typed back. "Just roll with it. You'll be fine." As she set her phone down, she couldn't help but laugh at the irony. Life had come full circle, throwing yet another curveball her way. Not directly this time, but through someone else's story. And somehow, it felt comforting. Chaos wasn't unique to her. It was part of the human experience. What mattered was how she chose to respond. That night, as she drifted off to sleep, Karoline thought about the journey she'd been on since that fateful day. From frustration to reflection, from confusion to clarity, she had transformed an ordeal into an Opportunity. Sure, the road ahead would have its bumps. She didn't doubt that for a second, but she also knew she was ready to face them, because now, more than ever, she believed in her ability to adapt, grow, and thrive. Whatever came next, she'd handle it, one unpredictable moment at a time. Months had passed since the event, and Karoline's life had settled into a comfortable groove. The chaos of that day no longer haunted her. It was more like a distant memory, something she could look back on with perspective rather than frustration. But every now and then, little reminders would pop up, nudging her to reflect on how far she'd come. One such reminder came in the form of an email from the organizers of the summit. At first glance, it seemed like just another promotional message about upcoming events, but as she read further, she realized it was different. They were hosting a follow-up panel discussion titled, Lessons Learned, Turning Challenges into Growth. To her surprise and slight amusement, they wanted her to participate as a guest speaker. Karoline stared at the screen for a moment, unsure of what to think. Was this some kind of olive branch? A way to make amends for the mess they'd created months earlier? Or maybe it was genuine recognition of the resilience she'd shown during the ordeal. Whatever their reasons, she couldn't deny the irony. Here she was, being invited back, not as a frustrated attendee, but as someone whose story carried weight. After a few minutes of deliberation, she decided to accept. Why not? If there was one thing she'd learned over the past several months, it was that opportunities often come disguised as challenges. Besides, this felt like closure. A chance to revisit the experience not as a victim, but as someone who had grown stronger because of it. The day of the panel arrived, and Karoline walked into the same grand hall where everything had unfolded. It looked different this time. Brighter, less formal, with rows of chairs arranged in a circle to encourage conversation. Attendees mingled casually, sipping coffee and exchanging stories. Despite the familiarity of the setting, Karoline didn't feel nervous. Instead, she felt a quiet confidence, knowing she wasn't the same person who had entered this room months ago. When it was her turn to speak, she took a deep breath and began sharing her journey. She talked about the initial excitement of receiving her VIP ticket, the confusion when she was asked to move, and the shock of watching staff members get fired. She described the frustration, the uncertainty, and the eventual realization that sometimes the hardest moments teach us the most valuable lessons. I didn't know it at the time, she said, pausing to scan the room. But that day changed me. It reminded me that we can't control everything, and that's okay. What we can control is how we respond. Do we let setbacks define us, or do we use them to grow? Her words resonated with the audience. Heads nodded, pens scribbled notes, and a few people even smiled knowingly, as if they'd been through similar experiences themselves. Afterward, several attendees approached her to share their own stories of resilience. One woman spoke about losing her job unexpectedly and finding strength she didn't know she had. Another man talked about navigating a family crisis while juggling work responsibilities. Each story reinforced what Karoline already believed. Everyone has their battles, and growth often comes from facing them head-on. As the event wrapped up, one of the organizers pulled her aside. "Thank you for coming today," he said sincerely. "Your story really brought home the message we were hoping to convey." Karoline smiled, feeling a sense of validation. "I'm glad I could help. Honestly, I never thought I'd be standing here talking about that day, but I'm grateful for the opportunity." Driving home that evening, she reflected on the full-circle nature of it all. What started as a frustrating, chaotic experience had become a defining moment in her life. One that taught her resilience, self-trust, and the importance of perspective. And now, thanks to her willingness to embrace that experience, she had inspired others to do the same. In the weeks that followed, Karoline noticed subtle shifts in how she approached new challenges. Whether it was tackling a tough project at work or stepping outside her comfort zone socially, she carried the lessons of that day with her. Life still threw its share of curveballs, unexpected delays, miscommunications, and disappointments, but she faced them with a calm determination she hadn't possessed before. She also found herself paying closer attention to the stories of those around her, Everyone carries burdens, fears, and triumphs, and listening to their journeys enriched her understanding of the human experience. It reminded her that none of us are alone in our struggles, and that connection is one of the most powerful tools for growth. One evening, as she sat on her porch watching the sunset, Karoline pulled out her notebook, the same one she'd written in after the event. Flipping through its pages, she marveled at how much had changed since those early reflections. Back then, she had been processing raw emotions, trying to make sense of what had happened. Now her entries were filled with gratitude, insights, and plans for the future. On a blank page, she wrote a single sentence. "Challenges don't break us. They build us, if we let them." Closing the notebook, she leaned back in her chair, letting the cool breeze wash over her. The road ahead wouldn't always be smooth, but she trusted herself to navigate it. She had proven time and again that she was capable of handling whatever came her way. And so, with a heart full of hope and a mind open to possibility, Karoline turned the page, ready to face whatever life threw her next.